I was 6 years old, I watched my parents in a really ugly situation. My dad had decided he didn't want to be with my family anymore. It was my mum and my 2 older brothers. And while the argument was escalating and I was in the bedroom with my 2 older brothers, and we were all pretty upset because we knew something bad was happening, I hear my mum call out. And to this day I still remember those words where she said, "Kids, come here." And her voice was really, really high pitched, and there was a lot of fear and anger and mixed emotions in that voice. And we all looked at each other and we knew we had to do as we were told. We'd been brought up that way. And we walk from our bedroom down the corridor to the bedroom door where my parents are in their bedroom. And my dad's got a loaded gun at my mum's head. And in that moment, I remember feeling like I was invisible. And the reason I felt invisible was my parents were so caught up in this ugly rage, this ugly, horrible, nasty, angry rage, that they were willing to do this in front of their kids. Not maliciously toward us, just not mindful of us. And in that moment, I really thought I was invisible. Now, I didn't know that. I was only 6. So I didn't know that I'd thought that. I just knew that it was like nobody knew that I was there. When I was about 8, I do remember that I didn't really have a lot of friends. We were living in a tiny country town. And where I was living, I could walk, I could cycle, I could go and visit my friends that were from my primary school. And there were only 30 kids in the entire primary school. So you can imagine I didn't have a lot of kids to choose from to be my friends, from anywhere from the tiny ones to the ones ready to go to high school. And in those moments, I remember when I was 8, where am I playing? I'm playing out the front of the house, and I'm underneath the tree, this bush as it was, and I was busily building these imaginary little places to live with imaginary people and imaginary lifestyles that an 8-year-old can imagine, at least. And I wasn't playing with anyone. I disappeared into this pretend world. That was my coping strategy. Again, I didn't know that I was 8. When I went to high school, I was an early starter in high school. I was 11. And that was because when I had been 4, there wasn't a kindergarten to go to, so I got shipped off to the nearest primary school. But I was a pretty smart little kid, so it was okay, and I didn't struggle with any of the learnings. In fact, I have this fun memory, and I don't know how accurate it is. You know how kids can have a memory, and that maybe it's not so accurate because everything is just so differently proportioned when you grow up. And I remember as this little person who's probably 12 months old, I'm probably sure I was a bit older, and I'm sitting in the lounge room of the house we were living here in Melbourne, and there's a newspaper underneath me, and I'm sitting on the newspaper. I have no idea why, but I distinctly remember seeing this newspaper folded out, and I'm sitting either on it or very close to it, and I'm reading out the headline. I'm reading out the letters that are in the headline. So I'm obviously old enough that I've picked up on the alphabet, and I'm looking at this big bold, I think it was the Sun, the good old Sun tablet, and it's there, and I'm reading it, and I can remember my dad saying in the background, "Look, she's reading the newspaper." So I've taken that story from way back then and assumed that I was a really smart little kid. But I'm glad that I had that thought, because when all of those terrible things were happening and I started school early, I was able to cope with school because I'd actually learned to trust that I was clever, and that was a good thing. So here I am, I'm 11 and I go to high school, and I realise that I'm perhaps out of my league because I'm only 11, because in my year level are older than me, except for one person. And the challenge that I had with that is that it meant adapting to something that was a new environment that I was unfamiliar with. What that did to me in that moment is it not only did it help me to realise that I was a bit smart because I was 11 and I was already in high school, I had another conflict inside my head that said, you don't fit in. You're not like everyone else. And of course, the first thing that I did was feel invisible. When you're 11, you sort of don't realise the coping strategies that you've got in place. And one of my coping strategies, and I won't be offended if you all giggle and smirk when I say this, I was right for a chatterbox. I would talk the leg off a chair. I've been told I was vaccinated with a gramophone needle, or that I could talk with a mouthful of marbles underwater. And it's pretty true. The thing is, when I was in high school, because there were so many horrible things going on in my family environment, even though my parents had long split up, after a retaliation episode where my dad had decided to come back and visit after this gun episode, and Mum wouldn't let him in the house because she had the gun pointed out the window at him. And I remember looking at that episode. That was the undoing of my family as I knew it. But my mum went on to meet my stepdad, and they've since been together for forever now. But when I was in high school and I was 11 and there was a lot of stuff that wasn't so good going on, I had a lot of anxiety. I wasn't necessarily someone who had depression. I was quite a bright, bubbly little kid. But I was very anxious. And that came through as very pressured speech. I would talk a lot, and I was always talking because I felt invisible. I didn't think anyone was listening to me. And a lot of the times they weren't. And I knew that because I would talk and my speech would get more anxious because I'd be looking at their body language and I'd realise they're starting to switch off because there's someone far more exciting to listen to or to talk to over there. And I'd be like, but I haven't finished and I'm still going and I'm still talking. And my brain's going, but you're invisible. No one's seeing you. No one's paying attention. Fast forward to, I'm in my 40s. And I'd chosen to live in Sydney by this stage. Big, bold, brave move that it was, given that I didn't know anybody in Sydney. I just decided I was going to try something different. So, packed up everything. Not that I had a lot of worldly possessions at that stage, but I figured, you know what? Try something different. I had a job. I'd secured the job before I went there. Thankfully, the job was advertised across Australia, and I put my application in, and I was successful in getting the job. And it was in a call centre of all things. Where better for someone who loved to talk? So I'm sitting in the call centre, and here I was thinking that I was doing my best work, but I was struggling because I didn't think I was good enough. And one of my managers was very cruel towards me and often pulled me aside and reprimanded me because I wasn't learning quickly enough. I had a 3-month probation period, and by the end of that 3 months, I still wasn't quite getting it. So a colleague of mine pulled that manager aside and said, look, you need to leave Terri alone. You're just making this personal. She's doing her best. And the question that was put to me was, how committed are you to this job anyway? And I'm like, I just packed up everything down in my hometown and came 1,000 kilometres away to nobody and nothing but to this job, and you think I'm not committed? Again, I felt invisible. Now that is invisibility is not that I didn't feel anyone was seeing me or that they weren't hearing me all the time, just when it mattered to me. When I had been in Sydney about 11 years or so, I just decided that the rat race was way too chaotic for me, and I got homesick. Not for Melbourne, I'd never lived in Melbourne previously. I'm from country Victoria, so I got homesick for country Victoria. And I remember thinking, I just want to see those gum trees out at a place called Kallawatta, which was near where I had been. And out out near Manu and all of these other really fabulously named little towns. And when I came back and I went on a driving expedition through that familiar territory, and it was like I could breathe again. It was like, I'm back home. One of the things that surprised me though is that I still felt challenged by this need to be heard. Believe it or not, my current job, my current day job, is a call centre. The apple doesn't sort of fall far from that kind of proverbial tree, really. And I know that I'm really good at the job. Not fantastic, but I'm really good because I'm committed to making sure everybody gets served with the best level of customer service that I can possibly give them. And March last year, I wasn't well. I was at work and I'm burying my head in my hands and feeling quite miserable. And my boss comes up to me and he says, "You're not well, just go home. Just go home." I have a very good boss, he's very good. And I look up at him with these half-closed, just strained eyes, and it's like, yeah, I'm good. So I painstakingly get my goods together. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and it's like, oh, I didn't want to drive, but oh well, I don't want to be here either. So I get in my car and I drive, and I'm about 1 kilometre from home. And I'm approaching a roundabout, and there'd been a driver on the road in front of me that had been slowing down, speeding up, weaving over the roads, clearly most likely on a mobile phone. And every roundabout he'd come to came to a dead stop, no traffic. And it's like, oh, you don't need to stop at a roundabout, please, I just want to go home. So we get to this 3rd and last roundabout, and he comes to a dead stop again, and it's like, oh, can you just go? I want to go home. So I toot the horn and I wave him through. He paused for just long enough to make me realise that he probably wasn't too happy about that. Next thing, his car floors it and he goes down the road, and I'm on the main thoroughfare, and this roundabout is a T intersection, and there's a T to my right. All road is clear and I'm ready to go, and I accelerate. And I'm in a little hatchback, so a lot of get up and go. Car has come from the right hand side just that little bit too fast and left me in that moment. It's like, if I accelerate, I'm not going to be able to accelerate in time. If I hit my brakes, I'm not going to be able to hit my brakes in time. I was already in the roundabout, and he's collided with the back wheel arch of my car and lifted my car up, and it was rocking across the road and then dropped down, and it's just mental chaos. I didn't know what shock was. Till then, I hadn't realised exactly what shock felt like. Fast forward about 12 months, and I was still recovering. And I haven't, as you can tell, I walk with a bit of a dodgy knee, and it's not the greatest experience, and there's still some issues going on. But about 12 months ago, I was stuck at home, and I couldn't do a lot. I couldn't drive to work. I was still kind of in that treatment phase. But I knew I needed to do something for myself because my mental health was suffering. I realised I wasn't okay, but I knew that I had the resources within me to do something about that, even though I couldn't go to work. So I enrolled in some speaker training. And I did the speaker training, and it was like, I really loved that. I didn't necessarily just acknowledge that I felt heard or that I felt visible. I realised all along the difference was I needed to have something to say. And earlier on, I really was just talking just to be heard, rather than feeling like I had something meaningful to add to the conversations. What was really valuable about the speaker training was that I learned that the sound of my voice is okay to me. And the interesting thing about the sound of the human voice, we hear our voice at a deeper timbre within our ears compared to what we hear on the outside world. So if someone records your voice and you hear it, you're probably going to think, oh, that sounds terrible. The difference is, on the inside, when we're hearing from within, the bones and the vibratory mechanisms of your ear actually dull the sound of your voice, so it sounds deeper in your own head. So that when you're actually speaking, and if someone records your voice or people that are hearing it, hear it at a higher pitch. So when you hear your own voice, that's why it sounds a bit different when you listen to your own voice recording. And that's why some people are never very comfortable, because it just doesn't sound like me. It's part of the reason. I didn't like the sound of my own voice, and still to this day, look, it's my voice, it is what it is. You know, I've had to learn to speak far more clearly, to slow down, be okay, knowing that not everyone's going to pay attention to me anyway. Because ultimately it's about communication. And the one thing I never learned throughout my early years was how to communicate. There was such an angry environment when everyone was basically either yelling or ignoring each other, including me. So I never really understood the value of speaking, to be communicative, to have a conversation with somebody. I had zero social skills as a kid. I had to wait till I left home and started my first job before I really understood there's a world of people out there and they're talking. What are they like? That's weird. I didn't know that you could have conversations that were actually engaging with another person, that wasn't just all about me, talk, let me talk, hear me. Because that's what I had only ever known. So when people talk about public speaking as something that is scary, it absolutely is. Because you've got to have the confidence in your ability to communicate something meaningful to people. And not all of us do. Sometimes there's something going on in the background that tells us that I just got to talk, I've got to be heard, I've got to tell somebody. Or the opposite, when you become invisible like I did, you disappear off into another world and you just don't speak at all. So it's really, really valuable that when it comes time to speak, to recognise that if someone's talking at you a lot and they've probably got a really high-pitched voice, there may be a bit of anxiety going on there. There may be something happening for them. So even though we're hearing a voice that may not resonate with us and we might not want to have that conversation, finding the confidence to have communication with another person, it's really just about recognising that we're all in this together. Just find a time, take some practice if you need to learn how to speak, but openly listen to somebody who may actually feel invisible, who needs to be heard. Because isn't that what we're all about, is having communication?